Just as the Tea Party forced mainstream Republicans into extreme territory before, they are doing it again. At this point, the only hurdle left to a bipartisan deal, the only obstacle in the way, is the Tea Party. Mr. Speaker, it's time to forget the Tea Party and take the deal.
Welcome back to Hardball. That was New York Senator Chuck Schumer. Today, Senate Democrats are trying to divide House Republicans in this budget fight. Speaker Boehner's spokesman Michael Steele responded, quote, Senator Schumer is not part of the CR negotiations, and he is making up fairy tales, trying to derail serious discussions on funding the government and cutting spending because he believes his party would benefit from a government shutdown. At this point, the House has passed a bill to fund the government through the end of the year while cutting spending. The Senate has not, and Senator Schumer's inaccurate rants won't change that. That seems to be the stalemate today. Do the Democratic talking points tell us that they think they have Republicans have the upper hand right now? In a moment, we're going to talk to Georgia Republican Congressman Paul Broun. But first, we're joined by South Carolina Congressman James Clyburn, who's the assistant Democratic leader on the minority side there. Congressman Clyburn, nice to see you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
All right, I want to start with what seems to be there's a message war here, and forgive me for being cynical, but the Republican talking point of the day seems to be the Senate Democrats haven't come up with a plan. We've passed two. The Senate Democratic talking point of the day seems to be, oh, look at the House Republicans. They've been captured by the Tea Party. You know, Congressman, does this mean we're not going anywhere in these negotiations, that we're stuck in a stalemate of talking points?
Well, I would hope not. I think the fact still remains that the ball right now is on in the House court. We've done since the lame duck when we did $41 billion. We've now done two short terms, $4 billion and $6 billion. That gets us to $51 billion. I think that it's up to us now to come up with something within the next 2 weeks. I hope it will be a long-term CR because I think that we make a mistake if we don't think that these short-term CRs do not have adverse impact on families. We seem to be thinking only in terms of what's good for us up here in Washington and what's good for us politically. The fact of the matter is we are fighting two wars. We have action going on in Pakistan, action going on over in Libya. And the families of these men and women need stability in their lives. So we ought to get serious about doing a long-term CR so that everybody can stabilize their families and their businesses.
But why shouldn't Senate Democrats, why shouldn't they offer up a plan in this back and forth? I mean, do House Republicans have a point here when they say, hey, look, they've thrown out a couple of different plans. They've passed a couple of these things. Why not have the Senate Democrats do a full-fledged plan? Instead, they've been going behind the scenes.
Well, Todd, you know, I never get into the business of trying to figure out why the Senate will do anything. I've been up here a long time
Congress
now.
There's bipartisanship sometimes, or there's partisanship times. It's called the House versus the Senate. But anyway, go ahead, Congressman.
That's exactly right. I think that's what's going on here a little bit. The fact of the matter is, we got serious back during the lame duck. Democrats cut $41 billion out of our continuing resolution before putting it forward. Now, since that time, we see that the Republicans have come up with only $10 billion. Now, we know that the White House has made it very clear. The senators have been very clear on another $20 billion. That gets us around $71 billion. I always say, Chuck, that if the distance between me and the other person are 5 steps, I don't mind taking 3 of them. And I think if you look at this, we've taken more than 3 steps. We're trying to meet them more than halfway, and they seem not to be willing to do a deal.
Okay, well, we're going to get to the other side on that in a second. Congressman Clyburn, thanks very much. So let's now go to Republican Congressman Paul Broun of Georgia. Congressman, I want to ask you this issue of this idea that maybe House Republicans are a little bit divided between where the leadership is and the deal that they may be willing to cut with the White House. versus where the Tea Party caucus is within the Republican House caucus. Is there a split between the two?
I don't think so, Chuck. Thanks for having me tonight. Actually, the split is between the Democrats, who I believe are planning and have been since the lame duck session to shut down the federal government for political purposes. In fact, they could have passed a long-term CR that would have taken us through this whole fiscal year. But Nancy Pelosi refused to do so. She gave us one through March the 4th. Why would she do that? I think it's their plan politically to shut down the government so that they could elect Barack Obama, put Nancy Pelosi back in the Speaker's chair, give Harry Reid a bigger majority in the Senate so they could force through their big government, high spending, high taxes, more borrowing type of agenda that's killing jobs in America. I think that's been their object all along since the lame duck session. And House Republicans are just proposing some actually meager cuts to begin this process. And when you're talking about a $3.8 trillion federal budget, cutting just $61 billion is just a pittance. It just needs to be a beginning.
As you know, the White House has said they're not going to sign a bill, any sort of long-term continuing resolution or short-term that contains so-called riders, these political statements that are trying to defund NPR, defund Planned Parenthood. Are you going to be able to support a deal, a compromise, that doesn't include these riders? Or do you believe that any bill has to include these riders or you won't support it?
Chuck, we need to talk about where we're going to cut in the federal government. And those so-called riders are just cuts of various programs. I don't believe in across-the-board cuts. We need to cut specific programs. We need to make major cuts. We're facing an economic emergency in America, and it is absolutely critical that we start sending powers back to the states and the people. We are headed towards an economic collapse of America if we don't stop this outrageous spending and borrowing that the Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, and Barack Obama have been doing, and we've got to stop it. We're in a critical situation.
Yeah.
When you're in a critical situation, you have to take emergency measures, and we need to cut.
But it sounds like that you're saying these riders aren't these riders that you're willing to let it go.
Well, I'm willing to talk and compromise over which federal program we're going to start cutting, but that we've got to make major cuts. That's just the long and short of it, to create jobs in America and to put us back on the right economic footing as a nation.
All right, Congressman Paul Broun, I got to leave it there. Thank you for your time.